Tuesday is here, and I see that Salty is already salty, and we've got all kinds of crazy stuff going on in the chat as we get started right now. Salty's throwing out threats. Don't even try to have a pre-recorded rapid fire. Never again. The question, Salty, would you rather have a pre-recorded rapid fire or no rapid fire? I mean, those are the options, right? Like,
Is it going to be pre-recorded tonight?
It will not be pre-recorded tonight. Jesse will be here live tonight. Jesse's actually coming into town tomorrow, but he and Vince had to flip-flop days, so Jesse is doing tomorrow's show, and then he's going to be driving from Cleveland to here, getting in late, specifically so that he can do the show live. So
nice.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow needs to be full of super chats, so we can,
super chats are they're not asked for, they're not begged for, but they are always welcomed to the show, to say
very welcomed. So, very welcomed. That's right.
Well, Sean, it's nice to see you, man. I'm gonna start us off with some positivity. It is great to see you on this wonderful Tuesday.
Well, thank you. It's great to see, and it looks like with daylight saving it all, you've got a little bit more light coming in your windows than I usually see too.
This has been absolutely terrible the last 3 days because you've had a kid, obviously, so daylight savings and kids do not always they do not always mix the best. So daylight savings has messed my 3-year-old's sleep schedule and general mood. It's thrown it upside down the last couple of days, to say the least.
I tell you what, I'm feeling it the last couple of days as well. I don't know how much has to do with travel and the fact that we had all these early games out there in Greensboro last week, but between that and daylight saving and the whole thing, I just I did not want to get up today, but I made it out of bed, so I guess that's a good thing too.
And you got a Houston Oilers shirt on, man, that's a throwback right there. I love it.
I do. I love this Oilers shirt, and it was one of those. I saw it. I think, what is it? The Homage or something like that. Is that the brand? You know what I'm talking about?
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. That sounds right.
I think it popped up in some ad, and I was like, you know what? I like those old Oilers uniforms. So I went ahead, and I figured, because people were asking me about it, why I'm wearing an Oilers shirt when I'm a Cowboys fan, and it's like, well, there's no more Houston Oilers, so they're a defunct team, so it's vintage, right? Like you can wear anything you want if it's not a team that exists anymore, right?
I used to be a collector of throwback jerseys, and I actually do have an Earl Campbell Houston Oilers jersey.
Nice.
So that is one that I own. Yes.
It's probably not tearaway, though. Have you seen any of those old highlights of the tearaway, when they were trying to tackle Earl by the jersey?
Yeah, when he headbutted the Los Angeles Rams defender and they literally tore his jersey off and he's still dragging like 3 dudes behind him.
That's right.
See that clip many times.
All right. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today because it is a big weekend. But Jesse, by the way, will be in for rapid fire in a little bit, like typical, but it will be a live rapid fire. So we will be doing that after Ryan is done tonight. But we've got Pot of Gold coming up. And when we were texting this morning about, everything that's going on, it's like, one, just the fact that Sunday is already St. Patrick's Day, and next week is like Jesse's birthday is actually next week. That's part of why he's coming in. But his birthday is the 19th, but 19th, 20th, we're already approaching the midway point of March. It is just flying by right now. I didn't realize how close we were to Pot of Gold, but we've got to talk about it because the big extravaganza is coming up. It's not just St. Patrick's Day, it's Pot of Gold Day. Are you happy as a recruiting guy that they have turned, one of the most festive days of the year into essentially a massive recruiting day, over the last few years?
Well, I think it's very smart of Notre Dame, to be honest, right? I mean, you already have a built-in holiday where it is celebrated to be Irish, right? So as the Fighting Irish of the University of Notre Dame, I think it's only natural to be able to utilize that leverage to yourself to be able to really. It's a great day, Sean. Like, this is how I would describe pot of gold. I remember this is my third pot of gold. First one was, of course, the 2024 class, the CJ Carr class, right? And I remember the pot of gold at that time. I was just kind of like, this is kind of, I don't want to say juvenile. Juvenile is not a right word, but it's like kiddish, right? As far as like it's like super, just it's super just kind of corny and a little bit lame. But I mean, that's what
it's
recruiting
along the
is.
lines of having the leprechauns greet the recruits, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
and the best recruiters, I think, utilize those things to their advantage, because I think we lose sight of, because like me as a 32-year-old, I might watch Chad Bowden in a leprechaun outfit and be like, that is super corny. Like, that's embarrassing. But the kids like it. The kids love it. I mean, they truly do. So I the first year I remember watching, I'm just like, this is kind of corny, but then you kind of just observe a little bit, and you just kind of get that general understanding of like, oh, the kids are really enjoying this. They're throwing the graphics on Twitter. I'm talking to a bunch of them about, just kind of how cool it is to be a part of the pot of gold, offer events, all those types of things. Right. And then last year, I feel like it just keeps getting better and better. Right. Because last year they had great success already with the pot of gold. I think of the 17 players that are committed to Notre Dame in 2025, 7 of them were offered during the pot of gold, which is just to speak to like this early evaluation of players. It matters a ton. It really does. Now, it's not the be all end all to everything. Like I think of like Owen Strebig was a player this past in 2025 that was not offered during pot of gold. Will Black was not offered during pot of gold. Maddie Augustine was not offered during pot of gold. Those players were a little bit after, but it is still a really cool event to be a part of. And a lot of these players, I think, really just kind of appreciate it. I mean, we're going to see it, I know we'll talk about it, but like, there's even a couple local kids that are like going to get offered by Notre Dame on St. Patrick's Day. Where like, that's going to mean something to them. They know about the University of Notre Dame. They know about the lineage. So I really think that it's a great event. I wish it wasn't on a Sunday, to be fully transparent. I wish it was on a weekday when I'm working, right?
Totally fair.
But Sunday, I'll be putting in the legwork. I'm already getting ready because fortunately we've gotten a little bit of a heads up of a lot of the players that are going to be offered during the event. So doing a little bit of that legwork early to kind of get some things ready and moving and prepared. But overall, it's going to be a great day because it really is just a fun day to highlight the 2026 recruiting class potentially.
This is, I think, like you said, so the 24 class, that was the first. That was the first. So this is what year
3?
Year
three.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the third one. So this is a Chad Bowden special kind of thing, right? Like he's the one who came up with this. Is that right?
I'm not even sure if it was around before that. I don't think so, though. I think this is something that Chad had kind of, it was one of his ideas, like, because I obviously wasn't recruiting before Chad was here, but I had never heard of anything quite as creative as some of the things he does, like you mentioned like the leprechaun thing. Remember last year when they dressed up like Secret Service agents and they were frisking the dudes coming out of cars? Like there's just a lot of like playful things like that. So it's definitely something that Chad has perfected the last couple of years. And I mean, this is going to be the biggest one yet, quite literally, with the amount of offers that are going to be sent out this year.
Well, and you were talking about not everyone necessarily gets an offer.
Yep.
On pot of gold. I've heard that, like that getting that offer on the pot of gold, that can be pretty important to some guys though, right? Like maybe there can be some egos that get bruised if you're not getting an offer on pot of gold.
I think it matters generally for recruits that for the people that were there first, right?
Okay.
That were there early. You know what I mean? Like I think that you see that a lot of times where it comes down to two different schools. One school, I just had a better relationship because they were there from the beginning, right? Like that's kind of always the moniker that you hear. So I think it's one about the longevity of being involved with the recruit, but I think two is that this is a little bit of again, I don't want to call it magical. I don't want to go like mystical. Like it's nothing to that serious of a degree, but it is a very cool thing to be a part of. And I think that a lot of the players, I was literally talking to a kid that I know is going to get offered, and he kind of let the cat out of the bag to me. But like he was talking about it, he was just like asking me a million questions, Sean, because he was so excited about it. Right? And that's the cool thing, is that a lot of these players are super excited about it.
Wow, that's great. So like, how would you rate the overall importance of it? To Notre Dame's, big picture sort of macro recruiting
Mhm.
efforts? Just how important is pot of gold?
I think it's vital because I think the cool thing is that every school has junior days, right? Everybody has their special barbecues and their summer cookouts and everything that they do in order to get these recruits on campus, get them excited about their program, and then hopefully get them for unofficial and official visits. Everyone has that. But who has pot of gold, Sean? Who has it? Notre Dame. That's the
I
only
mean,
school
it's
that has it.
literally like I think you kind of alluded to it. It's
Yeah.
tailor made for Notre Dame. Just because it's the Irish,
Yeah.
it's St.
I,
Patrick's Day, it's the Irish holiday, and they are the Fighting Irish. Like that, there's obviously
I can't think of any other university that could even leverage a holiday the way that Notre
yeah,
Dame can leverage
any
St. Patrick's
holiday.
Day.
That's right.
Right. So it is very unique to Notre Dame, which is important. The uniqueness, I think, matters a ton because it sets you apart and it makes you different. And ultimately, if you do end up going to Notre Dame, whether it's the 2025 class, the 17 kids that are committed currently to Notre Dame, or the 2024 class or 2023, or go historical all the way back to whenever you want to go, players that end up at Notre Dame were players that wanted to be different, right? And I think that this starts that difference. This is a unique thing to Notre Dame, and I think that it really sets the table because there's no commitments in 2026. Obviously, we're talking about kids that just finished up their sophomore year, but we will get some on Sunday that are offered that end up at the University of Notre Dame. Obviously, that will start there, and the reason that that trend is going to happen, that momentum is going to build, is because of this day that was built for Notre Dame.
Man. So, I mean, you've alluded to it a couple of times already. How many offers are you expecting to go out on Sunday?
We were talking briefly about this last year, and before the show, I should say, and I was trying to recollect last year, Sean. I'm pretty sure that last year, and don't quote me on this because I could be a couple off here, but I think there was about 80 to 90 players, recruits in the 2025 class that were offered last pot of gold last year. We are expecting, I am expecting, we as a collective are expecting almost 120 players to be offered on Sunday. So, I mean, we're expecting a lot more than the typical year. Because I mean, I think even 2 years ago it was probably around the same number. I would say it's probably 80 to 90 the last 2 years. And then this year, Notre Dame is up in their game a little bit as far as I think their evaluation, their full scope of things. And I mean, I'll even say this is that Notre Dame is getting very finite and specific on the positions that they're recruiting players for. It's not just all defensive tackles in a bucket. It's not just all edge player defensive ends in a bucket. It's not just off ball linebackers in a bucket. They are getting super specific with who they are offering and specifically at what position. So we should expect upwards of 120, I think. Not quite 120, but it's going to be somewhere in that realm.
Wow, that's nuts. Now are these all like first offers, I guess? Will there be any, sort of
Oh, no.
guys who already have
Yeah.
an offer maybe or
Yeah. There's several guys. I mean, I'll give you guys an example. There's 6 quarterbacks that have been offered by Notre Dame in the 2026 class. All of those guys will also receive an offer on St. Patrick's Day for the pot of gold. So it's their pot of gold offer, but it's not quite a reoffering, right? Because it's not like they took your offer away and then you just had to kind of reoffer at that point. But so there is a good number of players that already have been offered in 2026 that will be a part of the festivities though, because they want to include those guys as well.
are there any like crazy or unique, sort of pot of gold stories that, you can think of from the last couple of years?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, unfortunately, it's the ones that didn't end up well.
Yeah, I
It's
know, right?
typically the ones, right? I remember the big one was 2024. This young defensive tackle. I think you probably have heard of him, Sean. His name was Justin Scott. That played at St. Ignatius in
Yes.
Chicago.
Yes.
He was not offered during pot of gold, and people were very surprised about that decision. And then obviously it ended up not ending up well. But I mean, it's even like just the cool ones, like. Because I think for the first time, it's kind of like envisioning yourself with a program a little bit. And I remember like Deuce Knight last year putting out his graphic. And at that point, like I knew the name Deuce Knight, but I didn't know enough about him. And it's just like quarterback out of the state of Mississippi, which Notre Dame hadn't gotten a quarterback from the state or had only gotten one player out of the state of Mississippi in like the last 25 years or something like that, right? Like it has not been a place that historically they've been able to dive into. So getting players like that to, I think, envision themselves is part of the cool process. And again, like 7 out of 17 players that are committed in 2025 were a part of this event. So when you're talking about Justin Thurman, actually Justin Thurman wasn't offered. Excuse me, that was one that was not. But Christopher Burgess, when you talk about when you talk about Dominic Kulak, when you talk about Ivan Taylor, when you talk about Ethan Long, like there are several players, and Cree Thomas, like there are guys in the 2025 class that obviously got that offer on Pot of Gold and were eventually part of the class. So I think it's just stuff like that, man. Really the first time a guy gets to envision themselves a part of it.
Okay. What about sort of this immediate, like Notre Dame's backyard, Indiana, Illinois? You expect many offers to go out around this neck of the woods?
It's always funny because that's like one of the first questions people ask is, how many local guys are there, right? Like Chicago's been a big conversation point the last couple of years, for instance, because Notre Dame, I don't think, has done a good enough job in recent years. And this is even before Marcus Freeman. So this isn't like a Freeman issue, but just keeping some of the best players in Chicago at home to go to the University of Notre Dame. I remember last year, there was a big contingency of Chicago-based players, right? It was Christopher Burgess, it was Talon Taylor, it was Dominic Kulak, it was Joseph Reef. It was a long list. Nate Marshall, who is not with the class, and Talon Taylor obviously is not committed to Notre Dame. Notre Dame is still pushing for him, but regardless, this time last year, we were talking about all these Chicago kids that Notre Dame has to close on, and it was a long list, man. Like there were a lot of talent out of Chicago in the 2025 class. Looking at 2026, it doesn't appear to be quite the same volume of talent. There are going to be a couple players that I anticipate from Chicago and Indiana specifically to be offered during the Pot of Gold, but I expect the number to be around like 5 kids, right? Like it is not going to be nearly the volume that we saw last year. Last year was a very high volume of Chicago-based players that Notre Dame was interested in. I think that the home base, if we're going to call it that, of Indiana and Illinois, specifically Chicago, those numbers are going to be a little bit down compared to 2025, but there's still going to be quality in 2026 that we'll talk about when they are offered.
All right. Good deal. So what about the like the talent rich states, the ones that you think of right away? Texas, Florida, Georgia, California. I assume that there's going to be some pretty good volume from states like those.
I was very curious because I was looking down the list and I just kept seeing, Texas. I kept seeing Florida, I kept seeing California, I kept seeing Georgia. Like I just kept seeing the same initials over and over again. And you would expect that, right? Because if I ask anybody out there in the Twitterverse or YouTube lands, like what are the most talent-rich spots that develop high-level college talent for football, they would say Florida, they would say California, they would say Texas, and they would probably say Georgia as well. Like those are pretty much the premier states, right? But it's still jarring, Sean, because again, I'm talking about almost 120 kids that are probably going to be offered on Sunday. Over 50%, like I think it's like 54% are going to be from those 4 states. Like that's a little teaser for you. I can't tell you exactly who's going to be offered because that's their moment and that's going to be their big day, right? But I will tell you definitively because I've done the math here. 54% will be from 4 different states. I mean, wow. I don't think we quite understand like how absurd that is to think about. Literally, out of the entire country, 50 states, 4 states have over half the players that are going to be offered by Notre Dame on Sunday. Like that is just a ridiculous number. It really is, man. And so Notre Dame, I think we've seen California be down the last couple years in certain spots. California is going to be big for Notre Dame in 2026. Guaranteed. California is going to be big. I expect Notre Dame to hopefully make some headway back in Texas after really starting to hone in on Texas the last couple years under Marcus Freeman. I expect Florida to be a big player. And then hopefully Notre Dame is able to get into Georgia a little bit more consistently, right? So that is where the talent is in 2026. And that is where Notre Dame is going to have a lot of emphasis in 2026 as well.
All right. TD4ND wants to know about North Carolina. Any insight there?
Yeah, there's several kids from North Carolina. I didn't count out the exact number there. So just kind of off the top, let me work down this list and stall for a second because there's at least 3 or 4 that I saw. I saw 1, 2. I think I see 3. Yep, 3. This is in real time, by the way, folks. You need to appreciate me for a second here. 4,
Got his list ready to go.
Yep. I think 5 players from North Carolina is what we're anticipating, somewhere about that number. So another good number. Again, that's a single state. But I'll say I think the most players that we're expecting are, I think California has the most, Sean. It's like 18 players that are going to be offered its pot of gold just from the state of California. So 5 is a very solid number without question. But again, those talent-rich states are definitely going to make up the bulk of this, to say the least.
You expecting commits on some commits to come out of this like fairly quickly on Sunday, or soon after Sunday?
I would say usually the last couple years, specifically talking about 2024 and 2025, Notre Dame's first commitment in both of those classes was at the blue and gold game. It was, so 2024 was Brandon Davis Swain. That one obviously didn't end up very good because he ended up decommitting, and I think he's going to Colorado. But 2025 was Davion Dixon, the defensive tackle out of Florida, that's committed. So I would expect somewhere around there, Sean. Like, we're probably going to get our first 2026 kid somewhere blue gold game, late summer. That's usually when the first one pops. I don't expect anybody right out of this event. I don't think that anybody is in commitment mode because, again, we're talking about kids that just finished up their sophomore years. I would say maybe the summer leading up to junior year, usually maybe get one kid that pops then, and then during the junior year, going into the off season, that's kind of where the momentum is usually built.
So what's like the next big event? I mean, me, I'm Vince and I always issue the disclaimer. We're much more casual, followers of the recruiting, obviously, than you and Brian, So what's like the next big event recruiting wise coming up after this?
So the blue gold game is going to be huge. That's going to be big for the 2025 class, but you can bet your butt that there's going to be several 2026 kids that are going to be on campus for the blue gold game. Then after that, Sean, there's going to be a massive summer barbecue every single year. I forget what they call it. What do they call it last year? They've called it a couple different things the last 2 years. I think they called it grill and chill last year was kind of how they said it. So it's just a little bit of a cookout thing that they have, but that's going to be big for the 2025s, the rest of the kids that you're trying to close on before the season. And that's going to be a big 2026 event as well. So blue gold game, grill and chill. Those are usually the 2 big events that kind of lead up into the season.
Was that July last year? The grill and chill?
That had to be July. Yeah, it had to be July. Yeah, that would make sense because I felt like August.
Seemed like it was right before camp started, maybe. Something like that.
Yeah, I think it's right before then. So I would say somewhere in July, because usually August is a big time for commitments as well, but July is huge also. Like, I remember a couple years ago, Christian Gray committed on like July 4th. I think Micah Bell committed in July as well. So it's either end of June, early July, somewhere in that ballpark. But yeah, that's usually when the big barbecue is.
All right. Ed is on the Oilers. I was toying after the Cowboys got bounced in the playoffs. I was saying that if the Titans went back, they wore the Oilers uniforms as throwbacks at least once this year. If the Titans went back to the Oilers uniforms, I might just, wave goodbye to Jerry and the boys and just, go jump on Tennessee and ride that gravy train. But
yeah, I thought the Cowboys were going to sign Derrick Henry, man, but apparently he's the Baltimore Ravens. So.
I know.
Yep.
It's Vince. I don't know if Vince did it just to sort of mock Jesse and I or tease Jesse and I, like the fact that Tony Pollard signed with in theory anyway, he's going to sign with the Titans. I think tomorrow is like the official, day when they can actually begin signing. But, with the report that he's going to Tennessee, Vince is like, making room for Estime. And it's like, can we not even go down that road?
Well, the Cowboys did have a formal visit with Estime during the combine, man.
They did.
That might be where it's heading. Who knows?
Them and the Ravens, and of course the Ravens are going to get Derrick Henry. So like, do they go similar back to like to Henry and maybe think about Estime, or
it's possible.
I don't know. The Cowboys are going to draft a running back, trying to figure out which running back it's going to. They'll probably draft more than one because of the fact that
they let Pollard walk, right? Pollard's out in free agency, I think, right? So
yeah, he's going to Tennessee. So
he was the one going to Tennessee. He's the one going to Tennessee.
Right.
You're right.
Right. Yeah. Well, so Henry's going.
Yeah, you guys are going to let Rico Dowdell get the starting nod, man. You're going to let that happen?
I mean, the way it's shaping up right now, that might be the way it ends up going. Jesse's jumping in. Jesse, we were just talking about the Cowboys running back situation after Pollard going to Tennessee and Derrick Henry leaving Tennessee to go to the Ravens. I was talking about that text that Vince sent us yesterday, just teasing us about Audric Estime. So the way Michael Mayer went, that whole thing went down last year. I'm not holding out any hopes that the Cowboys actually draft someone that I would want them to draft.
Yeah, the last running back on the Cowboys roster right now is Deuce Vaughn, the Kansas State running back.
Well, don't they still? Ryan just brought up Rico Dowdell. Don't they still have him?
No, he's gone too. His contract was up after this season. So Deuce Vaughn is the only running back contracted running back right now.
Aaron Jones is available. Aaron Jones is out there.
He is. AJ Dillon's available too, isn't he?
I thought Aaron Jones went to who did Green Bay just get? I thought Aaron Jones went to like Minnesota already or something.
He did on a 1-year deal, Minnesota. Yeah.
I didn't even see that. I just knew that Jones got released. I didn't realize he had already signed with somebody.
And Joe Mixon's a Texan, so there's been a little bit of running back movement the last 2 days.
The Cowboys' big free agency move has been re-signing the long snapper. So
I don't know if you saw this, but
classic Cowboys free agency.
Of 32 teams, 31 made a move today. Can you guess the one that didn't make a move today?
Yeah.
Is it the Cowboys? I guess it's the Cowboys with how you approach that one, right?
The Cowboys will rely on their drafting and then decide what moves they want to make. They are very proud of the way they draft. So,
well, the owner is very proud of the way they draft. He wants to prove himself right time and again, and that's why they invest so much in their own guys. So
the one weird one is I had heard that the Cowboys were going to be in on Patrick Queen, but then obviously he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers today. So
has anyone seen all of those Kyle Hamilton tweets after all these Raven guys have been signing to divisional opponents? They're pretty funny because these Raven guys have signed with like the Steelers and have signed with the Bengals, and it's like one of them was like, "Do you know this guy?" And it's like him showing like the Vince McMahon, tweet where he's getting choked up, like, "No, I don't know this guy."
That's awesome. I did see a Browns player, I forget who it was, but a Browns player tweeted about the Patrick Queen signing. It was like, "Good, keep those bad eyes in the division." I was like, okay. Okay.
Serious shade, my goodness.
My favorite move so far is Jameis Winston to the Browns. That's a good move right there.
God, that room of Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston is going to be one of the most dysfunctional ones in the NFL. That is going to be hilarious.
That is a crazy quarterback room. They need
to get Joe Flacco back now to complete the weird trifecta of just awkwardness.
I mean, I guess if all Jameis Winston is getting is, like backup quarterback type opportunities, then you take it. But
yeah,
it just seems like an interesting move for a guy like him, for where he is with his age and everything. So
we've seen a lot of players go to divisional rivals this year.
Yeah,
it feels like
I find it weird. I find it weird. I don't like it.
Yeah. Like someone just put in the chat, and I'm right outside of Philadelphia, so obviously the big story here is Saquon Barkley going from the Giants to the Eagles, which is pretty hilarious. But yeah,
I know. All right, Ryan, are we? Did we get all the pot of gold stuff in there? You got anything else?
I would just say, quick announcement, folks. Friday we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into expectations for the pot of gold for Sunday. So Friday, Notre Dame recruiting hour. If you want to stop in there. And then next week, actually, there's going to be a slight schedule change. So typically we have the mailbag on Mondays, but Monday of next week is going to be the recruiting hour, and then that mailbag is going to move to next Friday because we're going to recap everything that happened on Sunday and all the players that were offered during Pot of Gold. So you're going to have recruiting hour Friday this week and Monday of next week. I hope you all are ready for it. I'm ready for it.
All right, it's coming. Wouldn't expect anything different with Pot of Gold on Sunday. So,
oh yes. All right, fellas, thank you so much for having me.
All right,
see you, Ryan.
Take care. Thanks, Ryan. Ryan Roberts, Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I have been waiting for rapid fire all day. I don't know if I told you this, but I tweaked my back over the weekend, so I've been
what?
I've been pretty limited the last couple of days.
No, you Didn't tell me that. I was unaware.
I knew I'd be made fun of, so I didn't really bring it up. But
okay.
I pinched a nerve in my back. My sciatica is hurting. So a lot of stretching the last couple days.
Yeah. So that driveway work when you come back, that's probably out then, or
Nope, that is not. That is a city job at this point.
okay. City, county, one of them, if we can ever get them out here. All right, so there are a million guys named Jaden with different spellings on the Notre Dame roster. You've got Jayden, Jaiden, and Jaden. Rank these guys in the importance of the spring for each of them. You've got Jaden Harrison, the wide receiver transfer from Marshall. You've got Rover / linebacker, however, specifically you want to look at it. Jaden Osbury with an I. You've got Jaden Mickey and Jaden Greathouse, cornerback and wide receivers with just the A in there. And you've got another Jay, Jaden Thomas, the wide receiver. So rank those guys in terms of the importance of the spring for each of them.
So the least important to me, and I think this will kind of make things a little bit easier, is Jaden Harrison.
Okay.
I just think that, he's a transfer guy. He's primarily going to be a return specialist. I mean, he'll mix into the wide receiver room, but his primary, goal or objective on this roster is being a return man. And then from there, I think you have a mixture of guys who are chasing opportunities because of inexperience, I guess you could say, like younger guys who are chasing after some starting time, and that's Greathouse and Osbury. And then you have some guys like Mickey and Thomas who have been around a little bit longer, but are also fighting, for more playing time on the field as well. And so I think that the person who has the rank them in terms of their most importance for the spring for them, I think Jaden Osbury has to be at the top of my list just because of the open door at the linebacker position. We know Kaiser is going to get a lot of playing time, but outside of that, I think Jaden Osbury stands a good chance of being a starter if he has a really good spring. So I think at the top, I have Osbury, and then I have Jaden Harrison on the end, and we can kind of fill in the middle.
Yeah, and that's just so that we don't each have to go through our list. I'll say I agree with you. I've got Osbury at the top as well. He's going to be battling for that rover position with Jalen Sneed, just a shade off Jaden. Actually, you've got an L instead of a D there in the middle, somewhat ironically, I guess. But yeah, so I put Osbury at the top as well because he's going to be battling for that. Does he also maybe have an opportunity, as you mentioned, like at the will linebacker or even in the sub package, for like that money linebacker position that they talked about, where you've got the Mac and the money in the nickel package, like does he fit into that potentially as well? So this is a guy who is obviously a reserve, and we had some sound a couple of weeks ago from Max Bulla when we got to talk to him about like Jaden Osbury was a guy who was really kind of frustrated with where he was last year, even as a true freshman, and kind of came back with a burr, under his saddle, and has been like working for it. Wants to kind of prove himself. So I think this is a huge spring opportunity for Jaden Osbury. I agree. I put him at the top of my list as well.
So after Osbury, I would likely have to go with Jaden Greathouse because I like in terms of spring, I more so favor the younger guys because I still think they are trying to get more repetition and more exposure around a lot of these coaches. And so while Greathouse started fast last season, he kind of tapered towards the middle due to injuries. And, obviously there was some lack of communication going around in the wide receiver room. But I still think there are big question marks at the wide receiver position as a whole. And someone like Jaden Greathouse can step up and be in control of his own destiny this spring for, a position that is largely wide open. And so I would have to go with Jaden Greathouse next.
See, I put him a little bit lower because, I think right now he's kind of penciled in as, like the number one slot Jordan Faison Faison right behind him, and then you've got Harrison as well. With Faison not being here, I think they kind of know what they're going to get. But I guess you could probably make a case for Greathouse being a little higher just because of the fact that, Faison really, showed out being the bowl MVP and all that kind of stuff. And there is, even though we think that Greathouse has a place someplace, and he's a guy who I think with some flexibility that they can move around, but with all the experience that they've added, I think maybe it could be fairly big for him as well. But I did have him a little bit lower. Did you have Mickey maybe next on your list after Greathouse?
I did have Mickey next, and the reason why I had Mickey is, he's in a tough situation. Last season he was behind Cam Hart, and now this season he's fighting, with Christian Gray, essentially, who is a very young and talented corner, in his own regard. And so I think with Jaden Mickey, it's, is it his time, or is he going to get passed up by someone younger than him? And I think him and Christian Gray have a very important spring of who's going to emerge as the corner opposite of Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah, and Marcus Freeman was saying last week that you're going to see both of those guys playing, but for that reason, because Mickey obviously is a year older than Christian Gray, I think that this is a big spring for him to, again, like to kind of reprove himself, because he did it a couple of years ago where he really flashed and then, kind of got like passed up, I guess, by his classmate Benjamin Morrison. But this is a big opportunity, because Christian Gray has shown what he can really be. And, even if we're going to see both of them, I think that this is an opportunity, for Mickey, to sort of prove that he belongs, if it is going to be like a 1-2 punch kind of situation, that he deserves to be there, and it doesn't end up being, like a 20-80 split or something like that with Gray getting the 80, that he can at least, keep it closer to a 60-40, if not 50-50 or whatever. I think that, he really has to kind of continue to prove that he belongs to be there for sure. And I think the only one we've got left then is Thomas, right? Now, I will say that I had Harrison a little higher, but, look, you make a good point, because again, Harrison, it's Greathouse, Faison, and Harrison as the slots. And I find it hard to believe that Harrison is going to make that much of a dent in the slot. Yes. But again, like with Faison being gone, it's at least an opportunity for him, maybe to surprise the staff a little bit with maybe what he can do. But his main role is definitely going to be kickoff returner. So I think whatever he can do is sort of a benefit. Like Jaden Thomas, I think the biggest thing with Jaden Thomas is just staying healthy and continuing to be healthy.
And that was the reason why he was, the one just above Harrison. Is I think by this point, what Jaden Thomas is, who he is, what skill set he brings to the table. Longer, a confusion. I think that, like you said, the matter with him is just staying healthy enough to consistently see snaps throughout the season.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to learn anything new about Jaden Thomas this spring. He is who he is. His main objective is staying healthy for as long as possible.
Exactly. I think that's just flat out the biggest thing for him is stay healthy, because it's him, Colsey, and then the freshman Micah Gilbert. Now Gilbert can potentially do what some of those freshmen did last spring and really kind of show that he deserves to be out there. And when you just look at the body and the kind of things that that Gilbert can do, he's got an opportunity. But we're not talking about Micah's, we're not talking about Gilbert's, we're talking about Jaden's today. So I think Jaden Thomas is pretty firmly at the top of the heap in terms of the boundary wide receiver. So that's why I had him and Harrison, much lower on the list than the other Jadens that we've talked about.
Our top and bottom were the same. It's just our middle two were flipped. That's it.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. Michael was asking earlier, can Kate Koval be added to the Notre Dame women's team for depth during the tournament? I assume, Michael, that you are joking because, of course, the answer is no. Because one, she's in the middle of her high school senior semester, but I think like maybe Neil Ivey needs to go scout the Irish volleyball team or something like that and see if she can find a little length out there that maybe they can bring in
just a body,
for a tournament. That's right. Give them something out there. DJ asking any update on Kylie Watson. No, there is no update. I don't know, considering where, just sort of the way that Neil Ivey has handled some of the, especially in-season injuries in the past. I don't know that we're going to get a definite answer. I would just, based on everything that I saw and heard last weekend, I would not expect to see Kylie Watson playing again the rest of the season. So I would just sort of leave it at that, unfortunately. Ed was asking when the blue gold game is. It is April 20th this year. All right, next question. What impact do you think Sam Hartman's extensive college experience is going to have when it comes to the NFL draft, Jesse?
This is a funny question. I think that Sam Hartman, here's the thing about Sam Hartman's experience, and I think that you can kind of gather this. I follow a lot of Kurt Warner on X or Twitter, whatever you call it these days. And a lot of times he's breaking down film, and oftentimes he's breaking down quarterback play. And recently he's been kind of, going through the different quarterbacks coming out of college, top draft picks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, et cetera, down the list. And the one thing that he looks at is the ability to kind of read defenses and give essentially take from the defense what the defense is giving you. And I think Sam Hartman's extensive college experience is able to provide a little bit more of that, I think, in comparison to Caleb Williams, Drake May, et cetera, because that's what Kurt Warner's biggest critique on those guys is it's hard to project what they're going to do in the NFL when they're not running NFL scheme and they're also not, they're not checking into plays or making hot routes. It's a lot of just design plays. They're not doing a lot themselves, right? But as we all know, when you get to the NFL, it's all about more of reading defense from pre-snap to post-snap, hot routes, etc. Checking the play at the line of scrimmage. And so I think, long story short, Sam Hartman is better than that. Are you sure
about that?
Or has more exposure.
Is it a long story? Or short story long? Sorry. Go ahead.
He has more exposure to that, is what I'm getting at. And I don't think that's enough to make up for the talent gap between him and Michael Penix and, JJ McCarthy, Drake May, etc. But I think it's going to ultimately land him, a late round draft pick or potentially be, one of the first undrafted guys off the board, because he will make it to a training camp because he has an extensive knowledge of football. He at least provides, even though the talent isn't all the way there, he still does know how to read defenses efficiently compared to the other guys.
And I think that he can pick up an offense probably relatively quickly as well. I mean, look at the two schools that he went to, Wake Forest and Notre Dame. He's a smart guy. I think he'll be able to pick up things relatively quickly. And as you said, I think he's going to be able to, he can read. I think that he can be kind of like a Mason Rudolph kind of guy.
Yes.
Like, he's not necessarily going to be a guy, and like even yesterday I brought up Chase Daniel, from Kansas City. And, like a guy like that who's not necessarily going to ever be a full-time starter, but he can always be a reliable backup. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that he's pretty close to maxed out in terms of what, his overall, ceiling is. But the fact that he does have all this experience between reading defenses, learning, being able to pick up the offense and go out there and perform it fairly consistently, like a guy like Tyson Bagent, for example. Like
Yeah.
that was a D2 guy, the Chicago Bears backup quarterback. He's a D2 guy, but he played 5 years in college, because he got the extra year and all that. Like he threw for something like over 17,000 yards in college. Bagent did. And again, like he came with a lot of experience behind him. He obviously didn't play at a high level, but he got a job as a backup who could come in and run the offense when he had to when Justin Fields went down. And I could see Sam Hartman being that kind of guy, again, like a Mason Rudolph. Like Rudolph's already been around for 5 years, and he's made a few spot starts here. You can easily see Sam Hartman kind of fitting that bill. And I think, again, just to the question, that experience that he has is going to be the reason why he's going to have an opportunity to stick with somebody. This is spring practice time, and this is something that I've been kind of thinking of for a little while. Do you buy or sell the idea of joint practices and or scrimmages with other teams during spring practice?
I buy this because at a certain point, it gets very, what's the word? Methodic, stale, boring, just going across the same guys all the time, right? Like when you introduce a scrimmage or some sort of joint practice, you're instantly injecting enthusiasm and just kind of overall focus. Just when you introduce someone else that you haven't been practicing the entire spring, I think you're going to get more out of your players in terms of competitiveness. And I think that you're going to really test whether or not, so what some of these guys have learned, because it's really easy to in spring practice to get kind of, the rhythm or hang of things, but there's nothing like true kind of test experience itself. And so when you can add a scrimmage game, I really think it just heightens the competitiveness. And it's really fun to hit someone that's not your own teammate that you haven't been lining it up across for 15 straight practices.
Do you worry about that at all, though? It's like, some guys might get a little bit too juiced up because it's not their own guy, and
that's what you see in some of these NFL training camp joint practices or some of those fights that break out. And I do think it's because of that. Guys get so fired up and so amped up that they're not able to kind of control their emotions in the moment. But I think it'd be more regulated at the college level, because in the NFL, no one cares, right? Like all of these guys are grown men, adults. There's really no repercussions. But when you do those sort of things in college, I tend to believe that there's more repercussions, because you're still, it's more of the team. The NFL is obviously more of the individual.
Yeah. I think it would make sense to like, you obviously wouldn't do it all spring long. It's not like you'd be partnered up with a team and, running joint practice. But like by the time you're 3 weeks into spring camp and you're a week or so away, from your blue gold game or whatever program it happens to be, whatever you call your spring game, like you pick a Saturday and, you go to a team or you bring them in and you run some actual live stuff to give yourself a, kind of a more, a better idea of what you've actually got. You can run some live stuff, and it doesn't, it doesn't even have to be tackled to the ground type stuff. You run the play, the one team's obviously running their defense, you're running your offense, and you kind of have a better idea of what you've actually got from your, from your guys. And then, like you said, from a player standpoint, you're so used to just, kind of going up against your own guys, and you do have thinner numbers in the spring because you don't have the entire freshman class. And, in many cases, all the transfers in and stuff like that. So I think it would make a lot of sense to be able to do something like that. I think it would be a good idea, which is why I don't think it'll ever happen, because the NCAA is the NCAA. So, I see Crying Belly lurking in there, and he's throwing out his crying shade and stuff like that. I just need you to breathe a little bit, Crying, and like if you have some actual, constructive, well thought out actual questions that aren't just negative jabs at, how bad you think everything is going to be. We'll answer those questions, but it's like we're not even going to get into some of that stuff that he's throwing out there right now. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame men's basketball beating Georgia Tech in their ACC tournament opener after blowing a 17-point lead is blank.
Is a victory. And I think, whether or not you see 17-point lead, you see 1-point lead, all that matters at the end of the day is a victory, right? Like Micah Shrewsbury and his team in year one showed up to the ACC tournament and won a game. I think that if you told people that at the beginning of the season, they would consider this season successful solely on that, making it to the ACC tournament and actually, winning a game inside the ACC tournament. And now I think is when it truly gets fun, because at this point, Notre Dame can just play spoiler
money now.
Yeah. Yep. They're playing with house money, and they're a really good defensive team. And if I'm a team in the ACC that, borderline kind of needs to win, basically you're not like the Dukes or the North Carolinas, like you need to have a good run and potentially, kind of maybe have a Cinderella upset and win this thing. Notre Dame is the last team I want to play, because they're playing hard and they play really good defense. And, if you're not on your game, Notre Dame can definitely expose you. And so there's just so much for them to gain right now and really nothing for them to lose. And I'm really excited to see how far they can push this thing into the tournament.
Yeah, I was surprised to see both teams score over 80 points, considering how well Notre Dame plays defense.
I took the over and the spread, and it turned out well.
Well, that turned out to be really well. Again, I was, especially like you look at how the first half played out, Notre Dame was actually scoring at a little bit higher pace. And, Georgia Tech got it figured out, I guess, in the second half, and they more than got it figured out. I mean, because that 17-point lead was with 10 minutes to go. Like, you get to that point, the way Notre Dame plays defense, I didn't think that there was any way once they got up by double digits because of their defense that Georgia Tech was going to be able to get back in it. But so much for that. I mean, you do have to keep scoring, I guess. Unfortunately, they were able to figure it out. But, one, you may have heard this before. It is hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. But, apparently even when you have a 17-point lead, I don't know. But, just what you said, it's just another sign of great things coming for the program, because there aren't a lot of teams who could go through a 7-game losing streak and losing, I think it was like 9 out of 10 games, at one point, and then come from that to really turn the corner and win 5 out of 6 games, some of them by some pretty decent teams. And let's not forget, like, they beat Virginia earlier in the season, and Virginia is the number 3 seed at the ACC tournament. But then they get their doors blown off by North Carolina, and then they give up the big lead today, and they still come back and win a game like this. And I feel like for all this team went through, when you look back at that 7-game losing streak and a lot of close games that they lost in there, I think a lot of teams, lesser teams, would not have been able to muster a comeback after you blow a big lead like they did today. So I think you obviously have to give it to Micah Shrewsbury. You've got to give it to the team that they are able to do it. And again, it's like this was really, you kept thinking early on, man, are they ever going to be able to turn a corner and at least, win a few games, have something to feel good about? And I think that they've got a lot to feel good about. Just the fact, like you said, like they were able to win an ACC tournament game. And I think that they've still got a chance to win 1 or 2 more before it's all said and done. I don't necessarily think that it's over with. So Johnny says, I know one thing, this version of Irish men's basketball would beat the November-December version of themselves by 50 points. I think that's absolutely right. That's for sure. D-Rock says, Notre Dame versus Wake Forest tomorrow, round 2, 2:30. Good luck. Go Irish. Were you going to say something?
Well, now it just kind of it gets really tough now, because they're the team that's going to be playing from beginning to end every single day until they kind of catch up, and they're going to be worn down, right? But it's just kind of what I was trying to talk about last week with Louisville, and how they got emotionally amped up to kind of come back and win that game. I think it was against Miami or Boston College, talking on the women's side, and then having to play Notre Dame, the day later. Like that just takes its toll on you. You getting, into these games, getting invested into these close games, and then having to come back up, come back out the next day and ramp things back up.
Yeah. Crayon says, "Are you guys going to be excited about 8-4?" No, if Kansas goes 8-4, I will be very disappointed because I feel like Lance Leopold has something building there, and 8-4, quite frankly, would be a disappointment if that's what they end up next season. So I would not be excited about 8-4 following the Kansas Jayhawks.
They're due for
Come on, Crying. You got to have something better than that, man. You got to have something better than that's weak. That's just, Oh,
I guess what my thing with Crying is what is his constructive criticism? I recently I kind of had.
You're going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I was out doing some field work, and these guys were. I was basically out there inspecting them, drilling kind of these what are called borings, right? And these guys kept telling me why they couldn't do something, why they can't do this, why they can't do that, but they never provided a solution on how we're going to, fix the situation or what their solution would be to enhance things. They only want to tell me why they can't do things, and it's funny because they know that's not an option. Like I can't go back to my boss and say, "Hey, we're not going to do this because, we just don't feel like it." So when I'm talking to Crying Belly here, I just want to know what your solution is. Why you
right.
constantly say
what's the actual solution rather than just pooping all over everything. I was trying to, come up with the good way of saying it, like what's the actual solution? What's the actual answer rather than telling us what all the problems are all the time? Good point. Good point. If you tell me why you can't do it, tell me what you can do.
Exactly.
TD4ND asks, have there ever been three better head coaches leading the football, men's basketball, women's basketball programs at the same time? Now, they're all three really good. Don't get me wrong. But let's not forget, like we did have a Hall of Fame women's basketball coach who was here before, who is, Neil Ivy's mentor, obviously, who, won a couple of national championships that, one of them just 6 years ago. And it's actually kind of amazing that it's actually been 6 years at this point. But, you had that just a couple years after Mike Bray, who is the program's all-time win, like those are the two programs' all-time wins leaders. And he did get the program to a couple Elite Eights. Was everything perfect at the end? No. And you do have a guy, who was not the most likable guy, who got the program to a couple college football playoff appearances and a BCS national championship game. So in terms of pure likability and, early success, I would say no, that, that there are not three better. But, again, opinions may vary on what you thought, especially of the head football coach and even the men's basketball coach. But you did have three pretty good ones, like in a consolidated period there. Like Muffet won a national championship in the same year that BK got him to the college football playoff, right? So, like in that year alone. I don't know. What do you think, Jess?
I think that the three head coaches currently is one of the most young, but like potential filled trios in the country. I think all of them are kind of, they're all starting relatively fresh. Obviously,
high upside, high ceiling.
Yeah, but they're still getting we're comparing them to people who were at Notre Dame for like Muffet and Mike Bray were at Notre Dame for a long time. Right. And these coaches are just getting started. Even Brian Kelly was here for a long time when you think about, the lifespan of college football coaches. So am I eager about, how young they are and how relatable they are and how much promise there is? Sure. but there's still ultimately a ton to prove before you can say they surpass, Mike Bray, Muffet McGraw, Brian Kelly, for the reasons that you mentioned. Those coaches achieved a lot of things. And while I don't think that, I think that Neal and Shrewsbury and Freeman are going to achieve things, but they're just getting started. It's
right.
I think what I'm ultimately getting at is head coaching is like a marathon. There's a lot that goes into it. There's, and these coaches are still relatively young.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, there are a ton of similarities between them, between like the personalities and recruiting and everything else. There's so much to like about all of them, but I think you're right. It's still largely, because Micah Shrewsbury even is very early in his head coaching career. He obviously has been a coach for a long time, but he's still really early in his head coaching career. So it's still a lot of upside really for all of them that's still out there. They've all done some good things in a short amount of time, but there's still a lot of ceiling for all of them as well, which is very good for all of us, So like, again, like if you came at it from that direction, just in terms of the upside. So Cryan's solution is something that is completely unrealistic. Hire Jeff Brom for 2021 and start Angeli. Stop pumping up ACC. Nobody's hyped by the media.
Okay. What is I know you have some opinions about Jeff Brom, don't you?
Not specifically. I mean,
I thought for some reason, not that you had like anything crazy to say about Brom, but I just can't. I thought there was something you said. He's the Louisville guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Former Purdue.
Right.
How about NFL? NFL free agency period open this week. It's been
a lot of movement
so far
today.
I know. Which is the bigger quarterback move, though? Russell Wilson to the Pittsburgh Steelers or Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons?
I would say Russell Wilson to the Pittsburgh Steelers, because Kirk to the Falcons, I mean, is it a move? Yeah, but like Kirk Cousins has like one playoff win or two playoff wins in his 12-year span. Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl under his belt. And more importantly to me, the Falcons are a way more stable organization than the Steelers are right now. Like, the Steelers are one of the best organizations in football, and you're looking at a guy like Mike Tomlin who just goes consistently 500 or better all season. And so like the framework in Pittsburgh is much better. You have a much better GM, you have a much better head coach, you have a much better defense, you have pieces along the offense. I just think it makes for a better recipe. And, in terms of like last season, look at the Steelers made the playoffs with like mediocre quarterback play and a really good defense. The defense
they
got
were 10-7
better
with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph last year,
and so the defense got better. Watt is going to be healthy again, and I think you upgraded at quarterback. If you're the Steelers, you go into this draft, you pick up a couple more offensive linemen to protect, Russell Wilson. You maybe grab some guys on the defense, and I mean, we could be talking about a team that could potentially win the division in my eyes. The Falcons, They don't have a good defense. Obviously, their organization is crappy. They're going through another head coach. They can't be on the same page of what they want to use their personnel with, aka Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, etc. And so there's too many question marks around the Falcons, and then the Steelers are just like steady Eddie. You know what you're getting with them consistently.
I mean, the Falcons are fortunate that they're in a bad division. None of the teams are good, right? Yeah, it's the NFL, so that could easily change within a couple of years because, that's happened before. It happens all the time that, because of the period that we're in right now, free agency and the draft coming up, things can change pretty quickly. But I mean, I just think the Falcons' ceiling is really, okay, you got Kirk Cousins. They're basically going to become what the Vikings were because that's what, Kirk Cousins, they're going to be better because they've got a better quarterback, but they're not going to be legitimate contenders for anything. All you're going to do by signing Kirk Cousins is be a little bit better in the immediate future and cost yourself what would have been a much higher draft pick by signing Kirk Cousins. But right. I think you're right with the Pittsburgh Steelers because of the organization they had, because of the fact, I still don't know how Mike Tomlin got that team to 10-7 and got
It's
him into
incredible.
the playoffs this year. I know.
I mean, consider too, like they played in what I would argue the toughest division in football with the Ravens, the Browns themselves. Like 3 playoff teams came from that division last season, and it's not like they had a weak out of conference schedule either. So to go 10-7, like you said, with Kenny Pickett at the helm, like it's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, he can. The Steelers, and you nailed it with like they can basically kind of follow the formula that Pete Carroll had when Russell Wilson was out there in Seattle. You probably need another receiver, like at least a receiver or two. But I think that they can. They like is even though that division is better than the NFC South that the Falcons are in, the fact that the Steelers got to the playoffs this year. Again, with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, now you add Russell Wilson. I think that they've got a chance to win that division, and you win a division and get a home game or two during the playoffs, and you've got as good a chance of anybody of making a run. So,
well, especially an experienced quarterback. Russell Wilson has more playoff experience than Kirk Cousins.
This is the kind of move, like we were talking last week about, is he a Hall of Famer or not? This is the kind of move that if they get a couple of pieces around him and, make a little bit of a run, like I realize he's on a 1-year deal right now, and he's going to, he'll cost them more actual money if they decide to keep him. But it's the kind of move that if it works out this year, they're going to keep him around next year, and he's got a chance to do what he talked about, where, hey, I need to get to a couple more Super Bowls. I need to win it, that kind of thing. Like he can change his legacy potentially if he stays in Pittsburgh for a few years.
I agree. And the crazy part is I would love to be Kirk Cousins. You want to know why? Because he gets paid market value for quarterbacks in terms of money, but there is no expectations for him comparatively at the quarterback position. Like when Kirk Cousins loses, I don't think he gets buried, but he still makes like top tier quarterback money in the league. And so it's like he gets paid to basically go out there and win games, but not win the games that matter the most. And I don't know. I know he's not trying to lose, obviously, but he just gets a lot of money for being just kind of above average, in my opinion.
Yeah. We get it, Crying Belly. You love backup quarterbacks. You're not very unique. I mean, the world loves backup quarterbacks, and apparently you have a love affair with every backup quarterback. So it's like you've said enough. I'm not putting it up on the screen. So with the Patriots trading former first-round draft pick Mac Jones to Jacksonville for a 6th-round pick, do you buy or sell Mac Jones as an official bust?
I do buy Mac Jones as a starting quarterback bust in the NFL. I mean, there's a reason why he got traded to be Trevor Lawrence's backup. And I'm pretty sure these guys were drafted in the same draft class, right? So it's not even like, or maybe a year apart. Like they're pretty much the same, age-wise quarterback. And now he's backing up a guy that's, relatively in the same position as him. So if the writing isn't on the wall, then I don't know how else to say it, because, other teams would have been calling. Minnesota would have been like, Minnesota is expected to sign Sam Darnold. You're telling me Mac Jones can't get a starting, job opportunity compared to Sam Darnold? I think that, with the movement at quarterback this offseason, Mac Jones not getting an opportunity at some of these spots, desperate for quarterbacks, and then signing to be Trevor Lawrence's backup, I think it's, clear indication that he's pretty much become a bust.
I mean, it didn't help him that he had a defensive coordinator and a special teams coach running the offense in his second year in the league. But at the same time, you've gone from being drafted in the middle of the first round by the New England Patriots to now you're going to Jacksonville to be a backup for a guy in Trevor Lawrence, who was, also drafted in the first round not that long ago, So you're being traded to go be somebody's backup. I don't think that there's any way around it. I think that you have to consider that a bust. Like maybe his career takes a turn and he ends up someplace within a couple of years, but there's a lot of unknown out there in terms of how that happens for Mac Jones. So I think for right now, you've got to say it's a bust. But you're being traded for a 6th-round draft pick. You were a 1st-round draft pick 3 years ago. You're being traded for a 6th-round pick to go be a backup. So
that is some serious depreciation.
Yes, in a very short amount of time.
I will say, though, Trevor Lawrence has battled injuries the last couple of seasons. So I love the move if I'm Jacksonville. I basically have a guy that's like, he's on the cusp of being a starting quarterback. So if something happens to Trevor Lawrence, you have a great insurance policy if you're Jacksonville. It's a great move.
He'll have an opportunity. Yeah, and there are probably, worse guys to go play for, I guess, than Chris Peterson as well. So, look at who Chris Peterson won a Super Bowl with in Philly, right? He won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Where's Nick Foles right now? But so, yeah, crazier things have happened, like look at, this is before your time. Look at, look at Scott Mitchell, he turned, and look at Brock Osweiler, just to name a couple of guys who did what you're talking about. Starting quarterback gets hurt and they parlayed that into the next big contract and, on to be a starting quarterback someplace else. So again, my point is it could still work out, but for right now, I think you've got to consider him a bust just because of what you said, the depreciation in a very short amount of time. You've gone from being a 1st-round pick to traded for a 6th-round pick. There's just no way around it right now. Well, that is going to do it for tonight. We started off with some recruiting talk. We finished with some quarterback talk and a little bit everywhere in between. We even had some crying along the way. We will be back tomorrow, of course. Always glad to see you. Bring your questions. Make them legit questions. Come on, Crying. You've got 23-ish hours to come up with some legit questions for the mailbag show tomorrow. All right. As long, see, I think that he revels. I think Crying revels in his BS quick. Just like to throw curveballs at us.
Keep us on our toes.
That's right.
Making sure we're sitting fastball, but ready to adjust to that off speed.
That's exactly right. Tommy Gunn's just getting here. Tommy, Brian posted the radio call from the end of the ACC championship game on the boards today. I tried to post it, and for some reason my account wouldn't post it. So Brian posted it for you there. We can't play that stuff because of copyright. We've had so many issues on YouTube with the different copyright materials. So Brian posted it on the boards today if you want it. So go for it. We will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Hit the like button before you leave. Subscribe, rate, and review. We'll talk to you tomorrow. IB Nation Sports Talk.